Today's blot is the Pei Aleph Amar Aleph Masechta Yevamos. We're up to the Mishnah. We're continuing to talk about a saris. We had a machlekes, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yeshua. We said that one saris is involved in chalitz and yibum, one isn't. And according to Rabbi Akiva, a saris b'nei adam, somebody who once was able to procreate and now can't because it's man-made, is shaykh to yibum, because generally as a person he was able to. But a saris chama, somebody born sterile, does not have the mitzvah of yibum because the Torah is never talking to such a person. And Rabbi Yeshua learns the other way around, that a saris chama, someone born that way, there's a cure in the future, so therefore shaykh, saris adam, once it's saris, it's over. We also learned that a saris chama born that way can marry into the Jewish fold. It's a saris adam, it was man-made, he became sterile, that he cannot marry into the Jewish fold. So we continue now with the Mishnah, Saris Chama. So this person, Saris Chama, who's able to marry the Jewish fold, if he's a Kohen, personally he can continue in Truma, but not Sabbat Yisrael. Any Saris can continue in Truma, because they're a Kohen, they're a Kohen. That's who they are. But if they marry somebody, so a Saris Chama who marries, who's legally allowed to marry him, she knows Sabbat Yisrael, married Jewish girl, Machil B'Truma. He enables her to eat Truma as well. That's din number one. And then Mars going to ask, of course, I mean, what do you need to tell us that for? But definitely a saris adam, someone who cannot marry into the fold, that if he does marry somebody, or psudak, or whatever, they cannot eat truma, because the marriage is not recognized. Rabbi Yisrael, Rabbi Shimon, androgynous, we had different opinions what androgynous is. You know, they have both signs, a male and a female, whether they're a male, whether they're a female, whether a separate barrier. This Mishnah holds that they're considered a male. And therefore, androgynous, koyin, if he was a koyin, and he marries a Bat Yisrael, Ma'achila b'Truma, he can actually give it to Truma because he's a male, and therefore it's a valid marriage. Rabbi Yehuda says, oh, what about a tumtum, someone that had a skin growth over it, so we had no idea. It's a suffix. Is he a male or is she a female? Shenikra, that ripped open afterwards. When him to turned out to be a male, nevertheless, he's a saris, and therefore, shouldn't go ahead and do chalitza, because he's like someone who is sterile. Androgynous is a male, so therefore noise he can marry others. Even though he has a female genitalia as well, he should not be treated as a woman, because he's definitely a male, and therefore if somebody does have relations with him, it's like sleeping with another male, you're chayiv skila. We'll see later. If your relations with him is as a female, not through the male genitalia, but through the female genitalia, then it's different. Rabbi Lezer says, "Androgynous chayavin olav schir kezacher." Rabbi Lezer says, "Androgynous is a zacher. If they have relations, it's like you're having relations with another male, but you're chayiv skila." What Rabbi Lezer is saying different than a common thing, we'll discuss later. The first thing is you said that a saris chama, a kohen, feeds his wife, saying, of course, it's a valid marriage. Why shouldn't he? No, Ma'atim, I would have thought, because the pasuk also says that the kohen is also Yelid Beisa, that all of his children can also eat truma. So we would have thought that only if he marries a woman and he's able to procreate, then everyone eats truma, including his wife. If he can give birth, then his wife will also eat. But if he cannot give birth to any children, then no does she eat. That she does. They treat it like a male. In fact, we'll see Zamach says, when we say that androgynous can feed his wife truma, I believe that according to Rabbi Shimon, it's not 100% like a male. It's sort of like a suffix. And because it's sort of like a suffix, then therefore maybe he's a male, maybe he's not. You're not sure what halachically his status is. So therefore, things, as Gemara explained, which is only midrabanan, like truma, that is what he can give her to. Because a suffix rabbanan, we are always lenient. But when it comes to letting her share in karbanis, that he cannot let her share in karbanis, enable her to share in karbanis, because maybe it's east of the Torah for Yisrael to eat it, and karbanis are from the Torah, and maybe he's a female, and therefore he cannot pass it on. Why is truma the rabbanon? We know truma is also from the Torah, but we're talking about truma bisman hazeh today. But Truma's manazeh is only midrabanan. As Amar Shlokish, ma'achil b'truma, he gets it to eat truma, ve'machil b'chazer, but he cannot get it to eat parts of the animal, the kachim, the breast and the shank. Bon Abichel says, ma'achil b'chazer shebeich. No, it's definitely a male, and therefore she can eat now everything. Now the Gemara explains. The Shlokish, ma'ishna, what's the difference? Chazer b'shaik deraisa, chazer b'shaik from the Torah. And the Gemara thinks right now truma nami deraisa. Truma is also from the Torah. So if you're not sure if he's a boy or if a man or a male or a female, so then how come truma he could pass on? Says the Gemara, hachmais kinin, what the Shlokish was referring to, truma bisman hazeh. He's talking about truma in today's times, which is only the Rabban. Says the Gemara, Avol bisman beis mikdash kayim mais. In the times of the Beis Hamikdash, in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, you had truma which is from the Torah, grains, and you had truma from which is Rabbanon, fruits. Giving truma from fruits is always midrabban, even the times of Beis Hamikdash. Today, truma is bisman hazeh is midrabban. So the Gemara is saying, so your distinction is between the Rabbanon and the Raisa. So therefore, in the time of Beis Hamikdash, when he had truma in the Torah, the man couldn't feed his wife truma either. So why do you make a distinction between truma and kachim? Make a distinction between truma today and truma yesterday. Truma yesterday in the time of Beis Hamikdash, the Andregos could not give his wife to eat, and today because only the Rabbanon he could. Why introduce kachim? Talk about truma itself. Alatoni, why does the Mishnah say that you cannot give it to eat in kachim? They talk about itself. Only truma rabbanon he could pass on to his wife. But truma deraisa, but truma he can't. Says the Gemara, you're right. When he said chazeh b'shoik, it didn't mean specifically chazeh b'shoik. He meant at the time when people normally would eat chazeh b'shoik, which is when? In the times of the Beis Hamikdash. And in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, he says you cannot give her anything. Not only not chazeh b'shoik, you cannot even give it to truma. And not only truma to the Torah, even truma to rabbanon, because we made a gzera. If we allow her to eat truma to rabbanon, you don't think she'll think that she's allowed to eat. She's married to a kohen, she's allowed to eat anything. And therefore, that's what it means. The time of chazeh b'shoik, the times of the Beis Hamikdash, that she cannot eat anything. This is exactly what he meant. When can he give her to eat? Only today's times, because today truma is only the rabbanon. But he cannot give her to eat even truma, even the rabbanon in the times of kachim. But filled with truma rabbanon, even if a truma is only rabbanon, for example, truma fruits. Why? Because since it's truma of the Torah from grains, people will be confused. They don't understand the difference. They think that she's married to a kohen, she can eat any truma. She might have come to eat truma deraisa. Rabbi Yechon disagrees. He says, he says, no. I think that Adrein is definitely a male, and therefore he can give her to eat everything. Even kachim is no problem. Says the Gemara. On the Rabbi Yechon said this me sabra. Rabbi Yechon said this is me sabra. Do you think that truma bisman hazeh the rabbanon? You're telling me that all truma today is the rabbanon, and therefore you're telling me that the Mishnah is talking about today, because then today he could feed his wife everything, and we're not what do you call it? And we're not worried about gzeres and all that. Yes, I'll prove it to you that all truma today is the rabbanon. Because I learned it says eagle begulim. If you have, let's say, a cake of pressed figs, they got mixed up with other pressed figs. So this pressed figs is one eagle of truma, and the law is that truma gets mixed up with chulun, its bottle is nullified not in 60 times but 101 times. So if you have one cake of truma that got mixed up with 100 of chulun, or the two possibilities we'll see in the Gemara later is a cake of truma tamei, which you cannot eat. They got mixed up with truma tahira, also with other truma, but tahir in 101 times. Now, the din is oile becomes bottle. Now we have a concept called davar sheminyan. We had in Gemara Beya, a davar sheminyan. Sometimes things are so significant that even if there's 100 times as much or 1,000, it does not become nullified. And one of them is a davar sheminyan. And we had the argument of Yechon the Shlokish. Is it kol shedarke limonos or eshedarke limonos? The Shlokish says as long as occasionally or quite often you sell it by the number. If you sell something by the number, that shows that each one is very, very chashuv. Like eggs, we always sell by the dozen. But eggs is only sold by the dozen. These are things that are sold many times by the number, and sometimes by you just take a bag full and say whatever it's worth. So that's according to the Shlokish, it's chashuv enough; it never becomes nullified. And the Rabbi Yechon says no. Only Eshadar Kalamonos, only if the only way you sell it is by counting the number. So now you're telling me that Truma becomes a bottle of cakes. Now the story with Igul Veli is that many times they sell it just about how many cakes you take, by the number. Sometimes they just take a bag full, a box full, and they sell it to you as whatever it's worth, a box full of whatever it's worth. But many times, according to Shlokish, that makes it very choshev. Now the question is, if it's choshev, why in the world does it become nullified? Igul be igulim. Why do it become according to Shlokish? Why does it become nullified? So he says, you know why? And I said, I'll tell you why. Because if Truma, that proves, because Truma today is only midrabanan, and Truma midrabanan therefore can nullify. Because if Truma today, let's say grains, would be from the Torah, and even true that the veil is only midrabanan, because fruits we said before it's rabbanan. But if there was present Truma of the Torah, we would be strict even with Truma rabbanan. We say, nah, cannot be nullified, because this is something that gets counted occasionally, and according to Shlokish, that's good enough to make it significant. And even though this is only with Rabbanan, since there is Truma from the Torah, people get confused, we'd make a Gzeira and we'd forbid it. The fact that we allow it proves that today there is no such thing as Truma from the Torah, even grains, everything is only with the Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, Amalei, Rabbi Yechiel said, that's not a problem, because I disagree with you. I hold that it's not a Dabash of million. I hold that even if you hold, I know that this is not considered chashuv. It's like a piece of pieces of meat, and we'll see later that what if, let's say, if you have a piece of a korban chatas that is tameh, that gets mixed up with other korban chatos which are toir, it becomes nullified. Why? Because it's not, you don't sell it by the piece, and even though it's mahatayda, it doesn't make a difference. It's not chashuv. I hold that davar shemin, in order to be chashuv, it has to be something which is always counted. Because you don't say kosher dark limonos, we say esher dark limonos, only something which is always sold by the number. But since Igul Devela is sold occasionally by the number, or even a piece of Inchat is sold occasionally by the number, not always, therefore it's not choshev, it's bottle. So it proves nothing. Could be Truma today's Mahatayra. Igul Devela is Chakra Rabbanan, but could be Truma today, but we're not going to make it, it's still nullified. Because even if we're being a type, it would be nullified, because it's not choshev at all. How do I know that? What is that? Sorry. Me saw it. Who told you kosher darkle monishnin? That only if occasionally it's sold by the number, so it's choshev esher darkle monishnin. It has to be dark something only sold by the number. My, what's the story? Now we learn Misha Hayilech Tilson Sheklayaked. If somebody had, let's say, some fenugreek of a bundle of fenugreek of Klayakarim, which is mixed up Klayim with vine, which is forbidden to have any benefit from any pleasures. What do you do with it? You don't go. You burn it. What about this arba b'chaydes? It got mixed up with other ones. Then kul and yiluku, because this is chashuv, it doesn't become nullified. You have to burn the whole lot. Divrei Rameir. And the reason why you have to burn the whole lot, why doesn't it become bottled? It's 101 times, 100 times greater, because Rameir says it's something that you count, and because chavila tilson is chashuv, it doesn't become nullified. The Chachamim say yalu be'echad u'masayim. It does become bottled by it's not like true, which is 100 times. By Klai Kedem, it's 200 times. Like Orla. Rameir used to argue, no, it never becomes bottled. You know why? Because kosher like lemanas and mekadosh, anything which normally is counted will ruin everything else around it, because it's so chashuv, so significant. It does not lose. It never loses. It never becomes nullified. The Chum disagree with the whole principle. They say there are only 6 things that we are going to concede that are chashuv enough that doesn't become nullified. Everything else, even though just because he counted doesn't make it chashuv. What are these things? Not because he's counting it, because be'etzim is chashuv. Einem mekajel shishit. What about only 6 things? Rabbi Kiva adds one more. Shiva 7. Eluheim. These are they. He says aguze egoize perech, nuts from the place of perech, with the badan, or pomegranates from a place called badan. The chovius tumas are sealed barrels, which are very chashuv. The chalfe tardin, and things that comes out of beetroots, the kol chekruv, and again branches of cabbage. Vidalas yavanis and his Greek melons or gourds. These 6 things are chashuv, and therefore not because he sells them by counting, just be'etzim chashuv, and they don't become bottled. Everything else does. Rabbi Kiva, loaves of bread baked at home, and also very chashuv, does not become bottled. So now, amongst these things, haruim are like nuts and pomegranates and barrels that they the first of the year become arla, is arla. So they get mixed up with other things. I don't care what multiple, they ruin everything else, and everything else becomes arla. And you have to treat it like arla, which means you don't have any benefit. The klai kedem, those things are suitable for klai kedem. For example, beetroots or cabbage or the gourd, and then klai kedem, the klai kedem. So the Meir is the one who introduces the idea that something is sold by the number is chashuv. Rabbi Yechon holds es shedarka limana shenin, only things which are only sold by the number as chashuv. It does not become bottled. So therefore, when it comes to pieces of meat, or karmel chatas, when it comes to gulit vela, when it comes to these cakes of pressed figs, he says sometimes you sell this way, sometimes that way. It's not chashuv enough. Therefore, it's not chashuv. It becomes bottled. And therefore, the case of by gulit vela doesn't prove anything but a trumas for the Torah Rabbanan, just not chashuv. The Shlokish holds no. Kol shedar kulamana shenina. As long as occasionally you talk about counting is chashuv, so how come the gulit vela today is bottled? Because you must say that truma is only with Rabbanan. There's no such thing as truma for the Torah, so we're not going to make a gzeira. My chaticha, what's this case of chaticha, piece of meat that Rabbi Yechon introduced, and he compared the two. The time we learned there are two possibilities. One is chaticha shel chatas tmeya, a piece of meat of a karmel chatas that was tamei, that you're not allowed to eat. And is arba b'meya chaticha shel chatos tahir. Mixed with another 100 pieces of chatos, but they were all tahir. That's case number one. And v'chein prusa shel lechem hapanim, a piece of the lechem hapanim that was tamei. Shenis arba b'meya prusa shel lechem hapanim tahir, and got mixed up with 100 pieces of lechem hapanim, the showbread that was tahir. Talem, it becomes bottle. It becomes bottle. And why Rabbi Yechon said it becomes bottle? Because occasionally you sell by the number and occasionally you don't. Therefore, it's not chashuv. When you follow the normal rules of kachim, they bottle in 100 times. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda and he says, Loi Tala. He says, no. He holds, we learned this a few times already, he holds min b'mina le bottle. He holds if you have the same, if you have kosher meat and treifa meat mixed together, he says it never becomes nullified. Because they're both the same, they actually reinforce each other. They don't cancel each other out, they reinforce each other. Min b'mina le bottle. So if a piece of meat of chatas got mixed up with a piece of meat, whether it's a tor chatas or whether it's chulin, they reinforce each other, and therefore becomes it never becomes bottle. Then the sefer of the Brisa continues. What about? So the first case was all of them were chatas, but Torah and tamei. What about some was chulin and some was chatas? Chatas tahira, shenis arba b'mechadish chulin tahira. Got mixed up with 100 pieces of chulin tahira. So it's all meat, but one was chatas and one was chulin. So it got mixed up. So everything was in Torah, no question of tumah here, but it's chatas versus chulin. They all got mixed up together. Or so let's say lechem hapanim piece got mixed up with ordinary bread. That's Torah. Give it a hackle. Everyone agrees. Lo yisalo. Does that become bottle? Why not? Because here you have. When do we rely on the rules of bittul? We have Gemara Bay, right? The base of base. Only when you have no choice. Here you have a choice because if it's all tahir, the only one there is somebody who can eat it. A kohen can eat the lechem hapanim. A kohen can eat the karmel chatas. So you sell it to a kohen. True. Much smaller market, so you're going to incur a financial loss to a degree, but it's not totally lost. You can still sell it. You can earn some money. And well, why should we reply the rules of bittul and say it's nullified? Go ahead and sell it to a kohen. There's no alternatives. Everyone agrees we're not going to employ the rules of bittul in this case here. And furthermore, since these things do become bottle. These things become bottle, and you want to only be concerned because of an Isa deraisa, so on and so forth. So that's a different duration of the sefer. The sefer you have an alternative in the ratio where tamei and Torah mix up together. Nobody can eat it, so you don't have alternatives. So we have to use the rules of bittul. So the Gemara. Autonomy, as we learned, the Reisha tells us clearly here that it becomes bottle. Now, according to the Shlokish, who says that if something occasionally sold by the number, it's so significant, it will never become bottle. Yet here by the Chaticha, we see it does become bottle. How is the Shlokish going to learn this? The Shlokish is going to say, here's a different kind of case. It's talking about benemucha, that it dissolves and disintegrated. It's no longer a piece. It's no longer a chashuv a piece. You say, oh, sold by the number, it's chashuv. The meat fell apart. And because it disintegrated, therefore, it's not chashuv. And that's why the Shlokish said it is bottle. So my time of the Rabbi Yehuda. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say? Right now we don't yet know the reason Rabbi Yehuda says it does not become bottle, but if it's disintegrated, why should it become bottle? And the Gemara thinks it has to do with the fact that it's significant. So therefore, but it's not significant anymore. It fell apart. Says the Gemara, no, don't do significance. Rabbi Yehuda, as we said before, Rabbi Yehuda Tamei, Rabbi Yehuda consistent with the view, bottle. He says that if it's exactly the same species, they reinforce each other. It doesn't become bottle. Says the Gemara, okay, let's say taka didn't disintegrate. Then if it didn't disintegrate, then Shlokish learned it's chashuv, it would become bottle. So why introduce to us another concept where change the scenario? Where Toyer got mixed up with chulin, talk about the same tumor, chatas that's tamei mixed up in chatas that was Toyer, and tell us it does not, and tell us that if it got mixed up in 101, it becomes it becomes bottle. But say, when is that talking about? When it disintegrated. But if it didn't disintegrate, then it's chashuv. It will not be bottle. Why introduce a new scenario? Talk about the very same thing that we're talking about right now and qualify it. So aval in muchlas it didn't disintegrate. What would it then be? Loy tala the davakam bottles added tani. Why learn aval chaticha shel chatas toida? That if you have why introduce a new case where you have a chatas that's toida? She's aval b'mei chaticha shel chon toida. You got mixed up the 100 chaticha chon toida. Loy tala does not become bottle. Nif like v'nistim but today. Let's learn within itself. When they're talking about b'shin mucha. Say like this. When do we say that this one piece of chatas is because it disintegrated, got mixed up with chatas that Titus Hamein Torah, it becomes bottle. Abalon Mucha didn't disintegrate like Tala. Titus, but like Tala, it won't be bottle. Why introduce a different scenario together? Says you know why? Because Tahidus, but Tahidus odifle. It's a bigger chiddush when chatas Torah got mixed up with other chatas Torah. And in a way, you would think, mamish, there's no tummy here at all. And if chatas Torah got mixed up, let's say, with chulin Torah, everything is Torah, and you think, if tameh you're allowed to eat becomes bottle, surely if Torah got mixed up with chulin, you're allowed to eat. And here we're telling you that everyone agrees you're not allowed to because you have an alternative. That's a bigger chiddush, and that's what the Brisa wanted to tell us, inform us of that bigger chiddush. Well, the Reish Lakish, a few more lines. According to Reish Lakish, Maishna Reisha, Maishna Sefer. So according to Reish Lakish, that Rabbi Yochanan said we'll talk about a normal piece. The chiluk between the Reisha and the Sefer is purely in the Sefer. You have an alternative. You can give it to a kohen. So why apply the rules of bit? What do you call it? But according to Shlok, it says talking about that really it's never bottled. It's only because it's disintegrated and therefore it's not chashuv anymore. So therefore it's bottled. So then, why in the Sefer do we say it's not bottled? You told me in the Sefer it's not bottled because so on and so forth, but it's not chashuv anymore. So surely it should be bottled. This is integrated according to Shlokish. He says the difference is then the Reisha is talking about it became tamei midrabanan, and it's talking about disintegrated. And yet, in the Sefer, it does not become bottled. Why? In the Reisha, it became tamei through the Rabbanon. How become tamei Rabbanon? If liquid, if livku, which is tamei Rabbanon, touches a vessel, mahatayra liquid cannot be metamei a vessel, but with Rabbanon it does. And so we're talking about that. So a piece of chatas became tamei by contacting a keli, which was tamei from liquid. So it's only a tumah midrabanan. And so even though tumah, every time there's a rabbanon, we should make a gzeira and be strict because there also is tumah from the Torah. So Shloki says, since it disintegrated, it's not chashuv, it is bottled. But the Sefer is talking about where there's an isa deraisa, and by deraisa, since it's a deraisa and it's min b'minoi, therefore it's not bottled. Even though disintegrated, and even though it's not choshev anymore as far as counting is concerned, but because it is tumah deraisa and it's min b'mina, this town holds that it's us. So the Gemara says just quickly 2 lines. Reisha is talking about tumas mashkin the rabbanim that what the meat the chatos was sitting in the keli that became tamei rabbanim from mashkin. So therefore we say that it's bottled. We're not going to be guys the Reisha, the whole thing disintegrated, we're bottled. But Sefer is the Reisha. But Sefer Torah became tamei from the Torah, and therefore we are stricter, even though disintegrated. It's not a question of number, is because it's the Reisha, and this Tana holds that min b'minyan with the same species, it is not bottled. We'll stop here, continue tomorrow, Mr. Shem.